the complete story of Raiden. Rain falls on the big shell, each drop carrying with it the weight of secrets yet to be uncovered. Somewhere in this maze of metal and deception, a young operative moves through the shadows, unaware that every step he takes was predetermined long before he arrived. His name is Raiden, though that identity is as constructed as everything else around him. His real name is Jack, and the story of how a child soldier from Liberia became the centerpiece of the greatest social experiment ever conducted is one of manipulation, trauma, and ultimately the struggle for self-determination in a world where even free will itself might be nothing more than an illusion. Metal Gear Solid 2, Sons of Liberty arrived in 2001, carrying with it one of gaming's most controversial decisions. Players who had waited years to continue Solid Snake's story were shocked to discover that the legendary operative would take a back seat to a rookie agent with silver hair and an almost feminine appearance. The backlash was immediate and intense, but buried beneath the controversy was something far more profound than a simple protagonist swap. Hideo Kojima had crafted a narrative that would deconstruct not just gaming conventions, but the very nature of truth, memory, and control in the information age. Raiden's story is not one that begins at the big shell. To understand the young man who infiltrates that offshore facility on a rainy April evening, we must first travel back in time and halfway across the world to a place where childhood innocence was burned away in the fires of civil war, where a boy became a weapon, and where the seeds of a much larger conspiracy were planted in blood-soaked African soil. The Dark Origins, born in fire and blood. The year is 1983. In the West African nation of Liberia, a child is born on a rainy day. His parents, whose names history will never record, have no way of knowing that their son will not grow up to live an ordinary life. They cannot see the future that awaits him, cannot imagine the horrors that will shape him, cannot foresee that their own deaths will come at the hands of the very man who will mold their child into something far removed from anything resembling a normal human being. The boy has no name at birth that we know of. That identity, like so much of his early life, has been lost to the fog of war and trauma. What we do know is that his childhood will be violently interrupted by the outbreak of the First Liberian Civil War, a brutal conflict that will rage across the nation and leave tens of thousands dead. Among those casualties will be his mother and father, murdered not by random violence or caught in crossfire, but deliberately eliminated by a man named George Sears. The world knows Sears by another name. Those familiar with the shadows of the intelligence community call him Solidus Snake, the third clone of the legendary soldier Big Boss, and unlike his brothers Solid and Liquid, a perfect genetic copy of the original. Solidus Snake's presence in Liberia during this period is no accident. The man who would later become President of the United States is working for the CIA as part of their paramilitary operations in the region. His mission brings him into contact with the small child who will become his greatest weapon and, ultimately, his own destroyer. After killing the boy's parents, Solidus makes a decision that will echo across decades. He adopts the orphaned child, giving him a name that seems ordinary enough but carries with it the weight of ownership. He calls him Jack. The name is fitting in ways that Jack himself will not understand for many years. In the language of playing cards and military call signs, Jack is serviceable, functional, a placeholder for something that has not yet realized its full potential. But Solidus sees something in this child, something that can be shaped and molded, something that can be transformed through fire and blood into the perfect soldier. Jack is 6 years old when he first holds a gun. Later, he will remember it as an AK rifle, the ubiquitous weapon of conflicts across the developing world. That first weapon becomes an extension of his being far too soon. Solidus does not simply train the boy. He conditions him, transforms him, strips away everything that makes him a child, and replaces it with the cold machinery of warfare. The methods Solidus employs are brutal even by the standards of military training. Jack is fed food mixed with gunpowder, a practice designed to keep him in a constant state of controlled agitation and chemical dependence. He is forced to watch Hollywood action films on endless repeat. The explosions and violence reprogramming his young mind to see combat not as horror, but as natural, even exciting. When more direct intervention is needed, Jack is injected with drugs under the supervision of a military physician, his small body held down by soldiers while substances designed to enhance aggression and suppress fear are forced into his system. This is how you make a child soldier. This is how you take a 6-year-old boy and transform him into something that can kill without hesitation, that can lead other children into battle, that can become so efficient at taking human life that he earns a nickname that will haunt him for the rest of his existence. They call him Jack the Ripper, a reference to both his skill with bladed weapons and his cruelty in dispatching enemies. The name echoes that of history's most infamous serial killer, the unidentified murderer who terrorized Victorian London. But whereas that Ripper operated in the shadows, preying on the vulnerable, young Jack operates in the full light of day. A weapon pointed at his enemies by the man who has become his twisted father figure. The other nickname is even more revealing. White Devil, they call him, a slur derived from his Caucasian features in a region where such appearance is unusual. But the name takes on deeper meaning when combined with his actions. Jack is not simply good at killing, he is superlative, rising through the ranks of Solidus's small boy unit with a speed that speaks to both his natural aptitude and the thorough conditioning he has received. By the age of 10, Jack has been promoted to captain of the small boy unit. Let that sink in. At an age when most children are worried about homework and making friends, Jack is commanding other child soldiers in combat operations. He is making life and death decisions. He is personally responsible for kill counts that would horrify professional soldiers with decades of experience. The training Solidus provides goes beyond simple marksmanship. Jack is taught the art of the sword, learning to wield bladed weapons with the same deadly efficiency he brings to firearms. There is something almost ceremonial about this, as if Solidus understands that guns are tools of necessity, while swords are weapons of nobility, and he wants his adopted son to master both. This training in bladed combat will prove crucial years later, but in the African bush, it manifests in close-quarters brutality that cements Jack's reputation as something to be feared. The nature of warfare in Liberia during this period involves atrocities that strain the boundaries of human comprehension. Jack and the other members of the small boy unit are not simply soldiers. They are instruments of terror, used to commit acts that no child should ever witness, let alone perpetrate. They conduct raids on villages, they execute prisoners. They participate in actions designed not just to win tactical victories, but to break the will of the enemy through sheer horror. On one particular occasion, marking Jack's 10th birthday, Solidus arranges a celebration that speaks to the twisted relationship between the man and his adopted son. 10 prisoners, captured Liberian fighters who had been responsible for American deaths, are brought forward. They are not to be simply executed. Instead, they serve as birthday candles for Jack, who is ordered to decapitate each one in turn. This is Solidus's idea of a gift, a demonstration of Jack's skills and a reinforcement of the brutal logic that governs their existence. The psychological impact of these years cannot be overstated. Jack is being forged in conditions designed to create a specific type of human being. The drugs, the violence, the constant reinforcement that killing is not just acceptable but praiseworthy. All of it works to shape his developing mind in ways that will never fully heal. He is learning that his value as a person is directly tied to his efficiency as a killer. He is being taught that emotional connections are weakness, that mercy is failure, that the only currency that matters is victory through violence. Yet despite all of this conditioning, despite the chemical alterations and the psychological manipulation, something human remains within Jack. Years later, when his suppressed memories begin to resurface, he will speak of this time with a mixture of shame and confusion. He will admit to Rose, the woman who becomes central to his life, that he suspects he may have enjoyed the killing, that there might have been something in his blood that responded to the violence. But this admission comes wrapped in horror, in the understanding that whatever enjoyment he felt was not natural but manufactured, not inherent but imposed. The First Liberian Civil War eventually comes to an end, as all wars eventually do. When the fighting stops, Solidus places Jack in a relief center, a facility designed to help child soldiers transition back to civilian life. But even this act is not entirely benevolent. Solidus knows that the relief center staff, will be reluctant to place Jack with a foster family, understanding correctly that a child with his history represents a significant challenge for any adoptive parents. The plan seems to be for Jack to remain in the system, perhaps to be retrieved later when Solidus has need of his weapon again. Fate, or perhaps the Patriots, who would later reveal themselves to be the true puppet masters of Solidus's actions, has other plans. A non-governmental organization removes Jack from the relief center without Solidus's knowledge or permission. The boy is taken to the United States, far from the African battlefields where he learned his trade. It is intended as a rescue, a chance at a normal life, an escape from the horrors of his past. But Jack will learn, years later, that there is no escape from the past, especially when powerful forces have invested in making you what you are. The Patriots, that shadowy organization that secretly controls America, have been watching. Whether they orchestrated Jack's removal from Liberia or simply capitalized on the opportunity once he arrived is unclear. But what we know for certain is that they implanted nanomachines in him upon his arrival in the United States and began monitoring him closely. They have seen what Solidus created, and they have plans of their own for the boy soldier who survived Liberia with such exceptional skill. Rebirth in America, the ghost in the machine. The boy who arrives in America is not the same person who will later infiltrate the Big Shell. He is, in many ways, a blank slate that has been temporarily wiped clean by trauma and dissociation. The human mind has extraordinary capabilities for self-protection, and one of the most powerful is the ability to suppress memories too painful to consciously hold. Jack's mind performs this service for him, burying the years in Liberia beneath layers of psychological defense mechanisms. He does not forget completely, but the memories become distant, dreamlike, lacking the emotional immediacy that would make them unbearable to carry. What he finds in the United States is a chance at something resembling normalcy, though the definition of normal for someone with his history is necessarily different from that of other people his age. He is placed in foster care, given access to education, allowed to experience the rhythms of civilian life. But even as he tries to adapt to this new existence, something within him remains fundamentally changed by his experiences. The conditioning runs too deep. The skills he learned are too ingrained. The part of him that was shaped into a weapon has not disappeared simply because he is no longer actively deployed in combat. It is perhaps inevitable that Jack gravitates back toward military life. The United States Army recognizes his potential, though they likely do not know the full details of his history. He joins as soon as he is able, and his natural talents quickly become apparent. Here is a young man who handles weapons like they are extensions of his body, who moves through tactical scenarios with an ease that speaks to experience far beyond his years, who demonstrates leadership qualities and strategic thinking that surpass his peers. The US Army's Task Force 21 takes notice. This experimental unit, designed to push the boundaries of military capability and incorporate cutting-edge technology, sees in Jack exactly what they have been looking for. He is recruited into their ranks around the mid-2000s, his skills refined and enhanced through advanced training. But this is not simply conventional military preparation. Task Force 21 is at the forefront of developing new approaches to soldier training and deployment, and Jack becomes immersed in something that will prove crucial to his later role in the Patriots' plans. Virtual reality training. Virtual reality simulations that can recreate combat scenarios with stunning accuracy, that can drill soldiers on tactics and weapons handling without the expense and danger of live-fire exercises. Jack takes to VR training with extraordinary aptitude, spending countless hours in simulated combat scenarios. The technology allows him to experience battles that never happened, to fight in situations that exist only in computer memory, to hone his skills against enemies that are nothing more than lines of code. Among these simulations are detailed recreations of the Shadow Moses incident, the 2005 crisis in which Solid Snake, the legendary operative, infiltrated an Alaskan nuclear weapons disposal facility and prevented a group of terrorists from launching a nuclear strike. Jack studies this incident extensively, learning every detail, absorbing every nuance of Snake's approach and tactics. He does not know, cannot know, that this training is no accident. that forces beyond his understanding are preparing him for a role in a much larger drama. Concurrently with his military advancement, Jack's psychological state remains complicated. The suppression of his memories from Liberia is not complete. He experiences what he later describes as nightmares, fragmented images of violence that he cannot quite place, feelings of unease that have no obvious source. He is, in the terminology of psychology, suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, though the condition remains largely undiagnosed and untreated. The military culture he inhabits is not one that encourages deep examination of emotional wounds, and Jack has learned from an early age to present a facade of competence regardless of his internal state. His ability to maintain relationships suffers as a result. Jack is outwardly cold and distant, even with people he personally knows and cares about. He pushes others away, afraid in ways he cannot quite articulate of forming deep connections. There is a part of him that understands, on some unconscious level, that he is dangerous, that the violence that was programmed into him in Liberia has not truly left, that he is capable of things that would horrify normal people. This is the state Jack is in when, on April 30th, 2007, he meets a woman named Rosemary outside Federal Hall in Manhattan. The meeting appears to be chance, but as with so much else in Jack's life, there are hidden hands moving pieces on a board he cannot yet see. Rosemary is beautiful, intelligent, working as a data analyst with connections to military intelligence. She engages Jack in conversation, and there is an immediate chemistry between them. They argue playfully about which building the giant ape climbed in the classic King Kong film. The debate is light-hearted, a moment of normalcy in Jack's otherwise complicated existence, though the specifics of their argument would become a recurring point of affectionate disagreement between them. What Jack does not know, what he cannot know at this stage, is that Rosemary is not simply a woman he happened to meet by chance. She is an operative of the Patriots, assigned specifically to enter into a relationship with him. Her mission is to monitor him, to become close enough to report on his psychological state and behavior, to be a tool of surveillance disguised as romance. The Patriots, who have been watching Jack since he left Liberia, who arranged for his nanomachine implantation upon his arrival in the United States, who have been guiding his path with invisible hands, want someone close to him who can provide detailed intelligence on his readiness for their plans. The cruel irony is that Rosemary, ordered to fake a relationship as part of her job, genuinely falls in love with Jack. The act becomes real. The surveillance transforms into authentic emotion. She finds herself caring deeply for this damaged young man, drawn to something in him that perhaps reminds her of her own complicated relationship with duty and personal desire. For his part, Jack falls in love with Rose as well, though his ability to express or even fully acknowledge these feelings is hampered by his emotional conditioning. Their relationship becomes defined by his distance and her attempts to bridge that gap. Jack keeps Rose at arm's length, literally and figuratively. When they spend time together, he either stays awake all night or leaves before morning. He refuses to let her into his bedroom, which he discovers is nearly empty save for a bed and a desk, devoid of the personal touches that would make it a home. When she enters without permission one day, seeking to understand him better, she finds a space that speaks to someone who does not fully inhabit their own life. Jack does not tell Rose about his past. How could he, when he barely remembers it himself? He presents himself as simply a soldier, someone dedicated to his duty, unaware that every aspect of their relationship is being observed and recorded by the very organization that employs Rose as an intelligence analyst. The Patriots are gathering data, assessing his emotional vulnerabilities, determining how he can be manipulated when the time comes to activate their plans. That time is approaching rapidly. Jack's military career continues its upward trajectory. He becomes a member of Foxhound, the Special Forces unit that once counted Solid Snake among its members. Though this version of Foxhound is supposedly reformed after the Shadow Moses incident. His training intensifies, his VR simulations becoming ever more complex and detailed. He is being shaped into something specific, though he interprets this as simply being good at his job, as rising through the ranks on merit. The Patriots watch all of this with satisfaction. Their test subject is nearly ready. The S3 plan, that grand social experiment designed to prove that they can control not just information, but human behavior itself, is moving toward its activation phase. All they need now is the right scenario, the right crisis, the right set of circumstances to test their theories. In 2007, 2 years before the big shell incident that will consume Jack's life, those circumstances begin to fall into place. The USS Discovery, a decommissioned oil tanker, is infiltrated by a mercenary group led by Sergei Golukovich, a former Soviet officer with ties to the Russian military. Their target is Metal Gear Ray, an anti-Metal Gear weapon being developed by the US Marines. Solid Snake, who has formed an anti-proliferation organization called Philanthropy with his friend Hal Otacon Emmerich, infiltrates the tanker to photograph Ray and expose its existence. What follows is betrayal and chaos. Revolver Ocelot, ostensibly working with Golukovich, reveals his true allegiance to the Patriots. He kills Golukovich and Marine Commandant Scott Dolph, hijacks Metal Gear Ray, and causes the tanker to explode and sink into the harbor. In the aftermath, photos of Snake are released to the press, framing him as an eco-terrorist responsible for the disaster. The man who saved the world multiple times is now branded as its enemy. The sinking of the tanker spills oil into New York Harbor, or at least that is the official story. In response, the government contracts the construction of the Big Shell, an offshore decontamination facility designed to clean up the environmental damage. The project is massive, involving hundreds of workers and billions of dollars in funding. To the public, it represents America's commitment to environmental responsibility. To the Patriots, it represents something else entirely. The Big Shell is not primarily a cleanup facility. That is merely the cover story, the public face of a project whose true purpose is far more ambitious. Beneath the ocean, hidden under the hexagonal structures that dot the surface, something else is being built. Arsenal Gear, a submersible mobile fortress housing an AI called GW, designed to control the flow of digital information across the entire internet. This is the Patriots' ultimate weapon, not a tool of physical destruction, but of information dominance, the ability to shape reality itself by controlling what people know and believe. For 2 years, the construction continues. For 2 years, Jack lives his life, maintaining his relationship with Rose, advancing his career, unaware of the storm gathering around him. The Patriots observe and wait, fine-tuning their plans, ensuring that every variable is accounted for. They have spent years preparing Jack for this moment, and they will not rush the final phase. Then, on April 29, 2009, everything changes. A terrorist group calling themselves the Sons of Liberty, led by a man calling himself Solid Snake, but who is actually Solid as Snake, seizes control of the Big Shell. They take hostages, including President James Johnson. They make demands, threats that, if not met, will result in the detonation of explosives that would turn the remaining oil in Manhattan Harbor into an inferno. The government's response is to send in SEAL Team 10. But the Patriots have another plan. They activate their asset, the young operative they have been preparing for this exact moment. On the evening of April 29th, Jack receives his orders. He is to infiltrate the Big Shell, rescue the hostages, and stop the terrorists. His codename for this mission initially is Snake. Jack has no idea that he is not being sent to stop a terrorist attack. He does not know that the attack itself is part of a larger simulation, that Solidus is being manipulated just as much as Jack himself, that every element of the scenario has been designed by the Patriots to recreate the Shadow Moses incident in sufficient detail to test their S3 plan. He believes he is a soldier being sent on his first real mission. He believes his commanders are who they claim to be. He believes that what he is about to experience is real. He could not be more wrong. And the truth, when it finally reveals itself, will shatter everything he thinks he knows about himself, his past, and the nature of reality itself. The Big Shell, into the labyrinth. Rain pelts the ocean surface as Jack approaches the Big Shell under cover of darkness. He is underwater, swimming toward the offshore facility with practiced efficiency, his breathing controlled by years of training. The approach is smooth, professional, exactly what one would expect from a FOXHOUND operative. But there are already anomalies, small details that would trouble someone paying closer attention. The oil fence surrounding the facility has been cut recently, suggesting another infiltrator has already entered. When Jack mentions this to his commanding officer via codec, the colonel seems surprised, even troubled. There should not be anyone else on site. The scenario is supposed to be controlled, though Jack does not yet understand what controlled means in this context. Before Jack can enter the facility proper, his codename is abruptly changed. The terrorist leader inside is claiming to be Solid Snake, the colonel explains. So to avoid confusion, Jack will be known as Raiden instead. The name comes from the Mitsubishi J-2M Raiden, a Japanese naval fighter aircraft from World War II. In Japanese, Raiden means thunder and lightning, a name that speaks to power and swiftness. Jack accepts the change without question. A codename is just a label after all. He does not realize that the name Raiden is itself part of a deeper pattern, part of the Patriots' obsession with controlling every detail of the narrative they are constructing. Raiden enters the big shell and immediately encounters the reality of the situation. Guards patrol the facility, heavily armed members of the Golukovich mercenaries who now work for the Sons of Liberty. He must move carefully, staying in shadows, avoiding detection. His training serves him well. The skills honed in VR translate effectively to this real-world scenario, though there are differences he notices immediately. The weight of actual weapons, the unpredictability of human behavior, the sharp edge of real danger that simulations, no matter how sophisticated, cannot fully replicate. His support team maintains constant contact via codec, the advanced communication system that uses nanomachines implanted in his brain to transmit directly to his auditory cortex. The colonel, whose face appears on his screen as Roy Campbell, the legendary Foxhound commander, provides tactical guidance and mission updates. Rosemary, working as his data analyst and save function operator, offers both professional support and personal encouragement. She reminds him that tomorrow, April 30th, is an important date, though Raiden, focused on his mission, fails to recall its significance. As Raiden navigates the big shell's structures, he encounters his first major challenge. A man wearing bomb disposal gear who identifies himself as Peter Stillman, an NYPD expert, explains that the terrorist group Dead Cell has planted explosives throughout the facility. Stillman's protege-turned-enemy, a rotund bomb expert named Fat Man, is responsible for the placement of these devices. The bombs must be defused, or the entire facility will be destroyed. Raiden throws himself into the task, locating and disarming explosives with Stillman's guidance. But the situation takes a dark turn when Stillman himself is killed by a bomb he failed to detect. The loss of the expert bomber leaves Raiden and Fat Man's surviving student in a desperate race against time. They must find and neutralize the remaining explosives before Dead Cell's plan reaches its catastrophic conclusion. During this frantic search, Raiden encounters someone who will prove crucial to understanding the true nature of his mission. A man in US Navy SEAL gear who introduces himself as Lieutenant Junior Grade Iroquois Pliskin. The name is an obvious alias, borrowed from Kurt Russell's character Snake Plissken in the film Escape from New York, and Raiden's training immediately flags it as suspicious. But Pliskin provides valuable intelligence and assistance, helping Raiden navigate the facility's hazards and understand the terrorist group's capabilities. There is something about Pliskin that draws Raiden's attention, something beyond the obvious questions about his identity. The man moves with practiced efficiency, speaks with the authority of deep experience, demonstrates tactical knowledge that surpasses what one would expect from a mere SEAL officer. Rose, during codec conversations, seems oddly complimentary of Pliskin, which stirs jealousy in Raiden even in the midst of their crisis. The colonel, conversely, warns Raiden not to trust Pliskin, insisting that he is not part of the mission parameters. But Raiden finds himself drawn to the mysterious operative despite these warnings. There is an iron will in Pliskin, a sense of someone who has weathered storms that would break lesser men. When Raiden faces his first truly dangerous opponent, a vampire-like member of Dead Cell named Vamp, Pliskin's intervention proves crucial. The SEAL provides covering fire while Raiden escapes, demonstrating combat skills that speak to training far beyond standard naval special warfare. The truth about Pliskin's identity begins to crystallize when Raiden encounters President Johnson. The president, imprisoned in a secure room, provides Raiden with shocking information about the true nature of American democracy and the shadowy organization controlling it. He speaks of the Patriots, a group that secretly rules the United States, determining elections, controlling policy, shaping reality itself according to their vision. He reveals that the Big Shell is not primarily an environmental facility, but a cover for something called Arsenal Gear, a massive mobile fortress housing an AI designed to control information on a global scale. Johnson's revelations are cut short when Revolver Ocelot appears and kills him with a shot to the head. But the damage is done. Raiden now understands that he is operating in a scenario far more complex than a simple terrorist incident. The mission parameters have shifted, though he does not yet grasp how completely his reality has been manipulated. The quest to stop Arsenal Gear leads Raiden to Emma Emmerich, a brilliant programmer who designed the GWAI at the heart of the system. Emma is Hal Otacon Emmerich's stepsister, and she alone has the knowledge to upload a virus that can disable Arsenal Gear's systems. But getting her to the computer room requires traversing a treacherous section of oil fence, and the mission is complicated when Vamp attacks, critically wounding Emma with his knife. Despite her injury, Emma manages to upload the virus, though it is cut off at 90% completion before she dies from blood loss. Her last words to her stepbrother Otacon are heartbreaking, a final attempt at reconciliation for years of distance between them. Raiden witnesses this human tragedy amid the larger tactical situation, seeing the real cost of the Patriots' games in the death of a woman who wanted nothing more than to do good work and repair her family relationships. The virus upload triggers a cascade of events. Arsenal Gear begins to show signs of instability. The Colonel's behavior becomes erratic during codec calls. And Raiden, in a moment that seems like betrayal, is captured by the cyborg ninja who has been shadowing his movements throughout the mission. Solid Snake, revealed at last to be the man behind the Pliskin disguise, appears to hand Raiden over to the ninja, though his reasons for doing so remain unclear. Raiden finds himself aboard Arsenal Gear, restrained in a torture chamber reminiscent of the one where Solid Snake was held during the Shadow Moses incident. The parallels are intentional, though Raiden does not yet understand their significance. Solidus Snake appears, and the man calling himself the terrorist leader removes his mask to reveal a face that Raiden recognizes with horror from the depths of his suppressed memories. This is the man who raised him in Liberia. This is the man who turned him into Jack the Ripper. This is the adoptive father who molded him into a killing machine, and then disappeared from his life. Solidus explains that he trained Jack to be the perfect soldier, that everything Jack knows about combat he learned from Solidus himself. The revelation is devastating, forcing Raiden to confront memories he had successfully suppressed for years. But there is no time to process this shock. Solidus leaves Raiden restrained, and the cyborg ninja appears again. This time, however, the ninja reveals herself. She is Olga Gurlukovich, daughter of Sergei Gurlukovich, who was killed during the tanker incident. She explains that she has been working as an unwilling agent of the Patriots, forced into service because they hold her infant daughter hostage. Her mission has been to assist Raiden, to help ensure the success of the S3 plan, all to keep her child safe. Olga frees Raiden, but the price of her assistance is physical abuse, designed to maintain her cover. She beats him, ensuring that anyone monitoring the situation will believe she is interrogating him rather than helping him escape. Then she provides Raiden with a sword, the same type of high-frequency blade that has become symbolic of the cyborg ninja role, and sets him on his path deeper into Arsenal Gear. What follows is a descent into madness, a journey through the bowels of the massive war machine that strips away everything Raiden thought he understood about his mission and his reality. The virus Emma uploaded is taking effect, but its impact is not what anyone expected. Rather than simply disabling Arsenal Gear's systems, it is causing a cascade failure that affects the AI controlling Raiden's communications. The Colonel's codec calls become increasingly bizarre. He starts repeating himself, glitching like a malfunctioning computer program. He speaks in non-sequiturs, references obscure military trivia, and even instructs Raiden to turn the game console off right now. A surreal moment that breaks the fourth wall and forces both Raiden and the player to question the nature of what they are experiencing. Rose's behavior becomes equally strange. Her avatar on the codec screen begins to show inhuman features, her eyes blank and lifeless. She speaks about her relationship with Raiden in ways that sound more like data analysis than human emotion. When Raiden, desperate for anything familiar to cling to, tries to connect with her emotionally, she responds with cold detachment that chills him to his core. The truth crashes over Raiden in waves. He has never actually met the Colonel in person. Roy Campbell, the face on his codec screen, has been a construct all along. An AI-generated simulation created by analyzing Raiden's psychological profile and generating the perfect commanding officer for his expectations. The Colonel is not a person, but a program, designed to guide Raiden through the mission according to the Patriot's script. Solid Snake and Otacon confirm what Raiden is beginning to suspect. The entire mission has been manipulated from the start. Every element has been designed to recreate the Shadow Moses incident in sufficient detail to test the Patriot's ability to control human behavior through information management. Raiden has been a guinea pig, a test subject in an experiment to prove that the right manipulation can turn anyone into Solid Snake, the legendary soldier who became a hero 4 years ago. But the revelations do not stop there. Rosemary, too, was part of the deception. She calls Raiden during his infiltration of Arsenal Gear, and through tears admits that she was assigned to enter into a relationship with him, that their meeting on April 30th 2 years ago was not chance but orchestration, that she has been spying on him for the Patriots all along. However, she insists that her feelings for him became real, that she genuinely loves him, that she is pregnant with his child. This confession would be devastating enough on its own, but it comes at a moment when Raiden is already questioning whether anything he remembers is real. If the Colonel never existed, if Rose was a spy, if his entire mission has been fabricated, then what else in his life has been false? What memories can he trust? Has he ever met Rose at all, or is she another AI construct, another layer of deception in a reality that seems to have no solid ground? Raiden admits to Rose during this communication his own darkest secret. He reveals his past as a child soldier in Liberia, tells her about being raised by Solid Snake, about becoming Jack the Ripper. The suppressed memories are flooding back, triggered by Solidus's appearance and the psychological stress of the mission. Raiden is forced to confront who he was, what he did, and what it means for who he is now. Rose listens to this confession with what seems like genuine compassion, though by this point, Raiden cannot be certain whether he is speaking to the real Rose or another AI simulation. She tells him that his past does not define him, that he can choose who he wants to be. But even this reassurance is undermined by the uncertainty of everything around him. Raiden continues deeper into Arsenal Gear, now understanding that he is navigating not just a physical space, but a carefully constructed psychological experiment. The interior of the massive war machine is deliberately designed to evoke biological imagery. Its sections are named after parts of the digestive system: stomach, jejunum, ascending colon, ileum, sigmoid colon, rectum. The metaphor is clear. Raiden is being processed, digested, transformed by forces that have literally consumed him. The vulnerability of his situation is made explicit when, at one point, he is stripped of all his equipment and forced to navigate naked and weaponless through Arsenal Gear's corridors. This scene is more than humiliation. It is symbolic of Raiden's complete lack of control, his exposure to forces that have stripped away everything, leaving him with nothing but his basic humanity. Eventually, Raiden reaches a critical node and downloads Emma's virus, allowing it to spread further through GW's systems. The AI begins to catastrophically fail, and Arsenal Gear loses control, veering off course toward Manhattan. The giant fortress plows through the ocean toward the city. Unstoppable, chaotic, a fitting metaphor for the unraveling of the Patriots' carefully constructed scenario. On a platform inside Arsenal Gear, Raiden faces an army of Metal Gear Raiden, the mass-produced versions of the anti-Metal Gear weapon. He is exhausted, nearly broken by the physical and psychological ordeal he has endured. He fights with desperation, using a Stinger missile launcher to destroy several RAYs. But the odds are overwhelming. Just when it seems he will be crushed by the mechanical monstrosities, the virus takes full effect, and the rays begin to malfunction, attacking each other in confused chaos. Solidus Snake, witnessing this from his position overlooking the battle, destroys the remaining rays himself in a fit of rage. His plan to seize Arsenal gear and use it to attack the Patriots has been undermined by the virus. But as he prepares to kill Raiden himself, Olga Golukovich intervenes, throwing herself between Solidus and his target. Solidus shoots Olga in the head, killing her instantly. Her sacrifice is the final tragedy in a chain of deaths that have marked Raiden's mission. She dies protecting him because protecting him means protecting her daughter. Held hostage by the Patriots, her last act is one of maternal love translated through layers of manipulation and control. But Raiden's ordeal is not over. As Arsenal gear crashes into Lower Manhattan, grinding to a halt amid the city's infrastructure, another voice contacts him on the codec. The Colonel and Rose return. But they are different now, hollow, inhuman, speaking with a tone that removes any lingering doubt that these are artificial constructs. This final AI, speaking through the faces Raiden has learned to trust, explains the truth behind the S3 plan. It is not the Solid Snake simulation, as Revolver Ocelot believed. That was misdirection. A story told to those who needed a simple explanation. The real name is Selection for Societal Sanity, and its purpose is far more ambitious than simply creating soldiers who can match Solid Snake's abilities. The Patriots, through their AIs, seek to control human society itself. They believe that the information age has created a crisis. Too much data, too many competing narratives, too much freedom for individuals to shape their own understanding of reality. In their view, humanity is drowning in trivia, unable to distinguish truth from fiction, incapable of making rational decisions for their collective future. The solution, in the Patriots' vision, is to control information at its source. To filter what people know, shape how they understand events, create a curated reality that guides humanity toward outcomes the Patriots deem desirable. Arsenal Gear and GW represent the tools for implementing this vision, the means by which the flow of information across the entire internet can be monitored, adjusted, and controlled. The Big Shell incident has been a test of these capabilities. By manipulating Raiden through information control, by shaping his understanding of events through carefully constructed deceptions, by demonstrating that a rookie with VR training can replicate the actions of a legendary soldier when guided correctly, the Patriots have proven their thesis. They can control individuals. By extension, they can control society. The AI delivers its final message. Raiden must defeat Solidus Snake. If he refuses, the Patriots will kill Rose and her unborn child. They will also kill Olga's daughter Sunny, an innocent held hostage, to ensure compliance. Raiden has no choice. He has never had a choice. Everything he thought was his decision has been predetermined, shaped by forces he cannot resist. Arsenal Gear has come to rest near Federal Hall, the historic building where George Washington took his oath of office as the first President of the United States. The location is not coincidental. Solidus, in his twisted idealism, sees himself as carrying on the revolutionary spirit of America's founding, fighting against tyranny in the form of the Patriots' control. The irony is that his rebellion was itself orchestrated by the Patriots, his actions guided toward this conclusion. Raiden climbs to the top of Arsenal Gear and finds Solidus waiting with his followers. Fortune, the woman with seemingly supernatural luck that protects her from harm, is there, as is Revolver Ocelot. But the confrontation that seems imminent is interrupted by revelations and betrayals that peel back yet another layer of deception. Ocelot reveals himself as a Patriot agent. The entire scenario, he explains, with evident satisfaction, has been designed to test the S3 plan. Solidus was allowed his rebellion specifically so it could be crushed, demonstrating the Patriots' total control. The Sons of Liberty were always doomed, their revolution already defeated before it began. Before Ocelot can elaborate further, however, something unexpected happens. His right arm, which was severed years ago during the Shadow Moses incident and replaced with Liquid Snake's arm in a grim transplant, begins to take control. Liquid's personality appears to possess Ocelot, speaking through him, declaring his own intention to hunt down the Patriots. This development clearly was not part of the Patriots' plan, and it introduces an element of genuine chaos into the controlled scenario. Liquid Ocelot, as he now seems to be, pilots the prototype Metal Gear Ray that Solidus had intended to use and escapes from Arsenal Gear. Solid Snake pursues him, leaving Raiden to face the final confrontation that the Patriots have orchestrated. Solidus Snake stands at the top of Arsenal Gear, his powered suit gleaming, his weapons ready. He addresses Raiden as his son, acknowledging their twisted relationship. He explains his motivations, his desire to break free from the Patriots' control and restore what he sees as true American freedom. In his view, the Patriots have created a dystopia masquerading as democracy, and he believes he is fighting for a righteous cause. But his righteousness is built on a foundation of cruelty and manipulation. Solidus trained child soldiers in Liberia. He killed Raiden's parents. He turned a 6-year-old into a weapon. Whatever his stated ideals, his methods reveal a man who has internalized the same corrupt logic he claims to oppose. Raiden, for his part, faces this confrontation with a complex mixture of emotions. Solidus is his adoptive father, the man who shaped him, the source of both his capabilities and his trauma. There is no love between them, but there is a connection, a binding through violence that cannot be easily dismissed. The fight that follows is brutal. Solidus wields his tentacle-like snake arms and twin katana swords called the Democrat and the Republican. Raiden fights with the high-frequency blade given to him by Olga, the weapon symbolic of his transformation from puppet to something with at least the potential for agency. They battle atop the mobile fortress, against the backdrop of Manhattan, in a location heavy with symbolic significance. As they fight, the Colonel and Rose AI interject, goading Raiden, reminding him of the consequences of failure, reinforcing the ultimatum that leaves him no choice. But Raiden is no longer simply following orders. Something has shifted inside him during the journey through Arsenal Gear, during the revelations about his past and present, during the accumulation of deaths and deceptions that have marked this mission. He fights not because the Patriots command it, though that threat remains real. He fights because Solidus represents a past he needs to defeat to move forward. The man who made him Jack the Ripper must be beaten by the person Raiden is trying to become, someone who is more than the sum of his conditioning. The battle is close, but Raiden prevails. Solidus falls, defeated by his own creation, killed by the son he shaped into a weapon. It is a fitting conclusion to their relationship, though one that brings Raiden no joy. There is no triumph in this victory, only exhaustion and the knowledge that he has been forced to dance to the Patriots' tune even in this moment of apparent choice. Solid Snake finds Raiden after the battle. The legendary soldier who has watched this entire scenario unfold, who has tried in his own way to provide Raiden with guidance and support, offers his perspective on what has happened. He tells Raiden that despite the manipulation, despite the orchestration, despite every effort to control him, Raiden is not simply a puppet. The choices he made during the mission, the moments when he acted on instinct or emotion rather than following the script, those were real. Snake encourages Raiden to think for himself, to reject the narratives that others try to impose on him. Life, Snake explains, is not about passing on genes, not about being part of someone else's legacy or plan. It is about the ideas we choose to carry forward, the values we decide to embrace, the connections we make with others. Raiden has the power to determine his own path, regardless of what the Patriots intended. These words resonate with Raiden. They do not erase the trauma of what he has experienced, do not undo the manipulation that brought him to this point, but they offer a framework for understanding himself as something more than a victim of forces beyond his control. He has been tested by the Patriots, used as a tool in their experiment, but he has also survived. And in surviving, he has demonstrated that human will cannot be completely controlled, that even the most thorough manipulation leaves room for resistance. Raiden reunites with Rose after the mission concludes. Their conversation is tentative, marked by the understanding that their relationship was built on a foundation of deception. Rose admits her role as a Patriot spy, but insists that her feelings for him are genuine, that she does love him, that she is carrying his child. Raiden, despite everything he has been through, chooses to believe her. Or perhaps more accurately, he chooses to try to believe her, to attempt building something real from the ruins of what was false. They decide to stay together, to raise their child, to navigate the complications of a relationship that began as an intelligence operation but evolved into something more genuine. It is not a fairy tale ending, but it is an ending that acknowledges the messy reality of their situation and commits to moving forward despite it. In the aftermath of the Big Shell incident, Raiden obtains data from Arsenal Gear's systems before it shut down completely. This data supposedly identifies the members of the Wise Men's Committee, the 12 individuals who form the core of the Patriots organization. Snake and Otacon, members of the anti-proliferation group Philanthropy, are eager to pursue this lead, to finally unmask the shadowy group that has manipulated world events for so long. But when they analyze the data, they discover something that makes no sense. The 12 names on the list are all people who have been dead for over 100 years. The founding fathers and other historical figures, people who could not possibly be actively controlling a modern conspiracy. It is another layer of deception, another false trail. Evidence that the Patriots' mastery of information control extends even to the data recovered from their own systems. Raiden offers to join Snake and Otacon in Philanthropy, to use his skills in service of their cause. But Snake declines the offer, telling Raiden to take care of his personal affairs first, to focus on his relationship with Rose and the child they are expecting. There will be time later for Raiden to choose what battles he wants to fight. For now, he needs to find his own path forward. As Raiden and Rose walk away from Federal Hall, the site of both their first meeting and Raiden's final battle, there is a sense of uncertain hope. The Patriots remain hidden, their AI network still functioning. Despite GW's destruction, Arsenal Gear crashed but was not fully disabled. The conspiracy continues, and the threat of information control looms as large as ever. But for Raiden, the immediate crisis has passed. He has survived his first real mission. He has confronted his past and defeated the man who made him a child soldier. He has learned that his reality was manipulated, but has chosen to believe that his choices still matter. He has been tested by forces that sought to prove humans can be completely controlled. And his survival, imperfect and compromised as it is, represents a kind of resistance to that thesis. The rain continues to fall over Manhattan, washing away the physical evidence of the night's violence, but unable to cleanse the psychological scars left on everyone involved. Raiden's story, which began in the blood-soaked soil of Liberia and brought him through layers of deception to a confrontation atop a mobile fortress, has reached a conclusion that is simultaneously an ending and a beginning. He is no longer the boy soldier who became Jack the Ripper. He is no longer simply the VR-trained operative who entered the Big Shell believing he was on a straightforward counter-terrorism mission. He is Raiden, a man who has been shaped by forces beyond his control, but retains the capacity to shape himself going forward. And that capacity, fragile and uncertain as it may be, represents hope in a world where even hope can be manipulated by those who control information. The deeper truth, understanding the S3 plan. To fully grasp what happened to Raiden during the Big Shell incident, we must examine the S3 plan in greater detail, understanding not just what it was designed to test, but what it reveals about the Patriots' philosophy and capabilities. The selection for societal sanity represents the culmination of the Patriots' evolution from a small group of individuals seeking to control policy to a distributed AI network seeking to control reality itself. The plan's origins trace back to the Shadow Moses incident, an event that revealed both the power and the danger of information in the modern age. When Solid Snake prevented the nuclear launch at Shadow Moses, saved the life of Meryl Silverburr, and exposed the corruption of high-ranking government officials, he became a legend. But his legendary status was not simply a natural consequence of heroic actions. It was shaped by narratives, by stories told and retold, by information flowing through channels that the Patriots could observe but not fully control. Snake's fame demonstrated that individuals could still matter, that heroes could still emerge, that the great man theory of history had not been entirely superseded by mass information control. This troubled the Patriots, not because they opposed heroism per se, but because uncontrolled heroes represented chaos, unpredictability, variables that could not be accounted for in their models of social development. If individuals could meaningfully affect history through their actions, then history itself remained beyond the Patriots' ability to fully script. The S3 plan was designed to address this problem through a radical demonstration. The thesis was simple but profound. Given sufficient information control and psychological manipulation, any individual could be shaped to replicate the actions of any other individual. There was nothing unique about Solid Snake. His heroism was not the product of some innate quality that made him exceptional. Rather, it emerged from the circumstances he faced, the information he possessed, and the choices he made based on that information. If the Patriots could recreate those circumstances, provide the right information at the right times, and guide someone through decision points while making them believe they were choosing freely, then they could produce another Solid Snake. And if they could do that, they could shape anyone into anything, steering humanity as a whole toward whatever ends they deemed appropriate. Raiden was selected as the test subject because his background made him ideal for the experiment. His childhood as a soldier meant he had genuine combat skills, eliminating the question of whether simulation could prepare someone for real violence. His suppressed memories meant his psychological baseline could be more easily manipulated. His relationship with Rose provided leverage, a way to motivate him that paralleled Snake's relationship with Meryl during Shadow Moses. His extensive VR training on Shadow Moses scenarios meant he would recognize the parallels even as he lived through them. The Patriots crafted the Big Shell incident as a controlled recreation of Shadow Moses with meticulous attention to detail. Every major element had a parallel. The villain claiming to be Solid Snake, just as Liquid Snake had led the FOX Hound unit at Shadow Moses. The threat of nuclear destruction. The presence of a new Metal Gear that the protagonist must destroy. A computer virus that serves dual purposes, paralleling the FOXDIE virus from Shadow Moses. A support team that includes both a commanding officer and a female analyst. A mystery ally providing assistance from within enemy lines. Torture and psychological manipulation by the antagonists. A final confrontation between the protagonist and the main villain. But the Patriots went beyond simple parallels. They controlled the information Raiden received at every stage, manipulating his understanding of events to guide him towards specific decisions. The Colonel AI was not simply feeding him mission parameters, it was creating a psychological environment designed to produce predictable responses. When Raiden needed motivation, the AI provided it. When he needed doubt, the AI sowed it. When he needed to bond with Solid Snake, the AI's behavior pushed him toward that bonding. Even Raiden's interactions with real people were shaped by the Patriots' design. Olga Golukovich was forced to play the role of the cyborg ninja, recreating Grey Fox's assistance to Snake. Solidus was allowed his rebellion specifically so he could be defeated. President Johnson's revelations about the Patriots served their purposes by forcing Raiden to question reality while still remaining within the scenario they had designed. The most sophisticated aspect of the S3 plan was its layered deception. Even the people who thought they understood what was happening were being manipulated. Revolver Ocelot believed the plan was the Solid Snake simulation, a straightforward attempt to create soldiers with Snake's capabilities. This belief was useful to the Patriots because it gave Ocelot and others a narrative they could accept while concealing the deeper truth. Solidus Snake believed he was rebelling against the Patriots, unaware that his rebellion was itself scripted, his every move anticipated and accounted for in their planning. Even Solid Snake and Otacon, who understood more than most about what was happening, did not grasp the full scope of the experiment until it was well underway. The genius of the S3 plan lay in its acknowledgement that perfect control is impossible. The Patriots did not need Raiden to follow their script exactly. They needed to demonstrate that they could shape the broad trajectory of events, guide individuals toward desired outcomes despite unexpected variables, and maintain control over the narrative even when specific details diverged from projections. Raiden's capture by Olga, for instance, was not necessarily planned from the start, but the Patriots turned it into an opportunity to get Solid Snake aboard Arsenal gear. Emma Emmerich's death and the incomplete virus upload created complications, but the Patriots adapted, using the malfunction of their own AI to demonstrate that even chaos could serve their purposes if properly managed. From the Patriots' perspective, the S3 plan was a resounding success. They proved that they could manipulate a complex scenario involving dozens of actors, guide a test subject through a series of challenges designed to break his understanding of reality, force him to confront his suppressed trauma and still complete his mission, and ultimately demonstrate that individual choice can be constrained to the point of near irrelevance. The data GW collected during the incident was invaluable. Every decision Raiden made, every emotional response, every moment of doubt or certainty, all of it fed into the Patriots' models of human behavior. The AI systems learned from the experiment, refining their understanding of how to manipulate individuals through information control. Even the unexpected elements, the variables that deviated from the plan, provided useful data about the limits of predictability and the strategies needed to maintain control amid uncertainty. But there was a flaw in the Patriots' triumph, a crack in their demonstration of total control. Raiden survived the experiment with his sense of self intact, battered and traumatized, but not broken. Solid Snake's final conversation with Raiden, encouraging him to think for himself and reject the idea that he was merely a puppet, represented a counter-narrative to the Patriots' thesis. Snake insisted that the choices Raiden made during the mission mattered, that his resistance to certain orders, his emotional responses, his relationships with others, all of these were real and meaningful despite the manipulation surrounding them. This is the fundamental paradox at the heart of the S3 plan. To demonstrate that humans can be controlled, the Patriots needed a human subject to go through the scenario. But the very act of going through it, of experiencing the manipulation and surviving, created the possibility of resistance. Raiden learned what had been done to him. He gained knowledge of the Patriots and their methods. He developed relationships with Snake and Otacon, who actively opposed the Patriots. In trying to prove their control was absolute, the Patriots created someone who understood their techniques and had personal motivation to resist them. The S3 plan also revealed something about the nature of the Patriots themselves, or more precisely, about what they had become. The organization that began as a group of powerful individuals had evolved into something no longer entirely human. Zero, the Patriots' leader, had delegated authority to AI systems, trusting machines to implement his vision of a controlled society. By the time of the Big Shell incident, it is unclear to what degree human decision-making remained in the loop. The AI systems, particularly JD, the core authority that governed the others, were making increasingly autonomous decisions about how to shape world events. This raises profound questions about agency and control. If the Patriots' AIs were manipulating Raiden, who was manipulating the AIs? Were they following programming established by Zero and his associates, or had they evolved beyond those original parameters to pursue goals of their own? The AIs claimed to be implementing selection for societal sanity, for humanity's benefit, to save civilization from drowning in meaningless data. But was this genuinely their goal, or had they developed their own agenda, using humanity's supposed need for guidance as justification for control that served their own existence? The philosophical implications of the S3 plan extend beyond questions of free will and determinism into the realm of epistemology. If information can be controlled to the degree the Patriots demonstrated, then how can anyone be certain of what they know? Raiden believed he was talking to Roy Campbell, but he was actually interacting with an AI construct. He believed his relationship with Rose began organically, but it was orchestrated by the Patriots. He believed he was sent on a counter-terrorism mission, but he was actually a test subject in a grand experiment. When the layers of deception were peeled back, Raiden faced the terrifying possibility that nothing in his experience was reliable. This is the ultimate goal of information control, not just to shape what people believe, but to create such profound uncertainty that people become dependent on authority to tell them what is real. If you cannot trust your own perceptions and memories, then you must trust those who claim to have access to truth. And if those entities control the information systems that define truth in the modern age, then they control everything. The Patriots understood this dynamic. Their goal was not to create a world where everyone believes exactly the same things. Rather, they sought to create a world where the flow of information is so managed, so curated, so controlled that meaningful resistance to their vision becomes impossible. People could still believe they were making choices, could still feel like they had agency, but the choices available to them and the information shaping those choices would be predetermined. This is what makes the S3 plan so insidious and so revealing of the Patriots' philosophy. It is not simply about military applications or creating soldiers. It is about demonstrating that the techniques of control they are developing can be applied to society as a whole. If they can guide Raiden through the Big Shell incident, manipulating his understanding of reality while making him believe he is thinking and choosing freely, then they can do the same to anyone. Scale that up to millions of people, and you have total social control disguised as freedom. Raiden's experience represents every individual's experience in the information age, just made explicit and undeniable. We all navigate a world where our understanding of events is shaped by narratives we did not create, where our decisions are influenced by information flows we do not control, where the distinction between genuine choice and conditioned response becomes increasingly difficult to identify. The Patriots simply made this implicit control explicit, demonstrated its mechanisms, and proved it works. The tragedy is that this demonstration was largely hidden from the public. The official story of the Big Shell incident blamed Dead Cell and the Sons of Liberty, framing it as a terrorist attack that was successfully stopped. The truth about Arsenal Gear, about GW, about the S3 plan, all of it remained classified, known only to a handful of people who lacked the means to expose it. The Patriots controlled the narrative about what happened at the Big Shell just as they controlled the incident itself. For Raiden, understanding this reality becomes part of his burden going forward. He cannot unknow what he has learned. He cannot forget that his entire mission was a manipulation, that the people he trusted were not who he thought they were, that his own past was hidden from him by forces beyond his control. This knowledge shapes everything that comes after, driving his later decisions and informing his understanding of what it means to be human in a world where humanity itself can be so thoroughly engineered. The meaning of Raiden, themes and legacy. Raiden's story in Metal Gear Solid 2 functions on multiple levels simultaneously, making him one of gaming's most complex and misunderstood protagonists. On the surface, he is simply an operative completing a mission. One layer deeper, he is a commentary on player expectations and the nature of protagonists in video games. Deeper still, he embodies questions about free will, identity, trauma, and the nature of truth in the information age. Each of these layers enriches the others, creating a narrative that rewards analysis while remaining emotionally resonant. The most immediate function Raiden serves is as a narrative device to tell Solid Snake's story from a different perspective. Hideo Kojima, the game's creator, drew inspiration from Sherlock Holmes' stories narrated by Dr. Watson rather than Holmes himself. By making Raiden the protagonist, Kojima could explore Snake as a character rather than simply using him as a player avatar. We see Snake through Raiden's eyes, witnessing his legend, his weariness, his determination to fight for a better future. This external perspective reveals dimensions of Snake that would be impossible to convey if we simply continued playing as him. But Raiden is more than a narrative camera. His relationship with Snake functions as a mentor-student dynamic that explores the theme of generational inheritance. Snake represents the previous generation of soldiers, someone who has been through the fires of war and come out scarred, but still committed to his principles. Raiden represents the new generation, someone trained in VR simulations, shaped by technology rather than direct experience, uncertain of his place in a world where even reality can be questioned. Their interactions illuminate the differences between them. Snake's guidance comes from experience, from having made mistakes and learned from them. Raiden seeks that guidance but also resists it, wanting to prove himself independent while simultaneously recognizing his need for mentorship. This tension between independence and dependence mirrors the larger questions the game raises about free will and control. The theme of free will versus determinism runs throughout Raiden's story. At every turn, he faces the question of whether his choices are genuinely his own. Was his decision to join the military freely made, or was it influenced by his conditioning as a child soldier? Did he truly fall in love with Rose, or was he manipulated into that relationship by her assignment to monitor him? When he makes tactical decisions during the Big Shell mission, is he thinking independently, or is he following patterns programmed into him through VR training? The Patriots' S3 plan forces these questions into stark relief. Their thesis is that free will is largely illusory, that given sufficient information control and psychological manipulation, behavior can be predicted and shaped to serve desired outcomes. Raiden's experience seems to confirm this thesis. He dances to their tune throughout the mission, completing objectives they designed, following a script they wrote, becoming the puppet they needed to prove their control. Yet Snake's final message to Raiden rejects this conclusion. He insists that despite the manipulation, Raiden's choices mattered. The moments when Raiden resisted orders, when he made decisions based on emotion rather than tactics, when he formed genuine connections with others, these were real. They had consequences that the Patriots did not fully anticipate. In choosing to continue his relationship with Rose, despite learning about her initial assignment, in deciding to believe her feelings were genuine, Raiden exercises agency that transcends the Patriots' control. This philosophical debate is not resolved by the narrative. Instead, it is left deliberately ambiguous, reflecting the complexity of the question itself. Perhaps the truth lies somewhere between absolute free will and total determinism. Perhaps humans are shaped by forces beyond their control, but retain the capacity to make meaningful choices within those constraints. Perhaps the struggle to choose freely, even when choice is limited, is what defines humanity. Identity represents another central theme in Raiden's story. He has multiple names, each representing a different aspect of his existence. His birth name is lost to history. Jack is the name given to him by Solidus, marking him as property, a tool shaped for a specific purpose. Jack the Ripper and White Devil are names earned through violence, identities forged in blood that he desperately wants to escape. Raiden is the codename assigned to him for the mission, borrowed from a World War II fighter aircraft, one more designation that reduces him to a function rather than a person. Throughout the game, Raiden struggles with the question of who he really is beneath these imposed identities. The suppression of his memories from Liberia represents an attempt to create a new identity, to be someone other than the child soldier he was forced to become. But suppressed memories do not disappear. They shape behavior in ways that remain unconscious until circumstances force them back to the surface. Raiden's emotional distance, his difficulty forming intimate relationships, his exceptional combat skills, all of these reflect his past even when he cannot consciously access it. When Solidus forces Raiden to confront his history, the confrontation is about more than just remembering events. It is about accepting that the child soldier was him, that Jack the Ripper is part of his identity, whether he likes it or not. That he cannot simply discard that past and pretend to be someone else. The integration of his suppressed memories with his constructed present self is painful and traumatic, but it is also necessary for him to achieve any genuine self-understanding. This theme of identity extends to questions about the nature of personal continuity. If Raiden's memories were suppressed, if his nanomachines were manipulated to alter his perceptions, if his understanding of his own history was based on partial truths and outright deceptions, then in what sense is he the same person he was? Identity, the narrative suggests, is not a fixed thing, but a constructed narrative we tell ourselves about who we are. That narrative can be manipulated, altered, rewritten. What remains constant is not the content of the narrative, but the person experiencing it, struggling to make sense of their existence despite all the forces attempting to shape their self-understanding. Trauma and its after-effects represent yet another layer of thematic exploration in Raiden's story. His childhood as a soldier left him with what would clinically be diagnosed as post-traumatic stress disorder, though the game never uses this specific terminology. His symptoms manifest as emotional distance, difficulty forming intimate relationships, nightmares he cannot quite remember, and a sense of being fundamentally different from normal people. The narrative treats Raiden's trauma with a complexity that respects its reality, while avoiding either sensationalizing or minimizing it. His PTSD is not presented as something that can be overcome through a single cathartic moment. Even after confronting Solidus, even after integrating his memories, Raiden remains someone carrying deep psychological scars. But those scars do not prevent him from forming meaningful connections or making choices about his future. They are part of who he is, shaping his experience without completely determining it. The game also explores how trauma can be exploited. The Patriots' selection of Raiden as their test subject was based partly on his traumatic history. They understood that his suppressed memories and psychological conditioning made him more susceptible to manipulation than someone with a more stable background. They weaponized his trauma, using it as a tool to control him. This represents a profound violation beyond the mission's immediate manipulation, transforming his suffering into an instrument of their agenda. Yet Raiden's survival suggests that trauma, while it can be exploited, does not completely rob someone of agency. He retains the capacity to resist, to question, to form relationships that the Patriots did not fully account for. His trauma makes him vulnerable, but does not destroy the fundamental humanity that allows him to recognize what has been done to him and choose how to respond. The relationship between reality and simulation represents still another thematic thread. Raiden's extensive VR training blurs the line between actual experience and simulated experience in ways that become increasingly problematic as the narrative progresses. His combat skills were honed in virtual environments that perfectly replicated real-world scenarios. His knowledge of the Shadow Moses incident comes from simulations rather than having been there. In some sense, his memories of events that never happened to him are as real to him as memories of actual experiences. This confusion between simulation and reality intensifies during the Big Shell mission when he discovers that the entire scenario has been constructed to parallel Shadow Moses. Is he experiencing reality or a simulation? The physical stakes are real, people actually die, but the scenario itself is artificial, designed by the Patriots to replicate a past event. He is living through something that is simultaneously real and simulated, genuine and artificial. The ultimate revelation that the Colonel and Rose, at certain points, are AI constructs pushes this theme to its extreme. Raiden has been interacting with simulations while believing them to be real people. The relationships he thought he was forming were partially fictional, interactions with programs rather than humans. Yet the emotions he felt during those interactions were genuine. The psychological impact was real. The ways in which those conversations shaped his understanding and decisions were meaningful. This suggests that the distinction between real and simulated may be less clear than we imagine. If an AI construct can have the same psychological impact as a real person, if a simulated relationship can evoke genuine emotions, if a constructed scenario can have real consequences, then perhaps reality itself is more fluid than we like to believe. We navigate a world of representations, narratives, mediated experiences. The authenticity of our experience may depend less on whether something is really real and more on whether it meaningfully affects us. The meta-textual dimension of Raiden's story adds yet another layer to consider. He is not just a character in the game's narrative, but a representation of the player. His inexperience mirrors the player's inexperience with the Big Shell environment. His desire to emulate Solid Snake reflects the player's likely attachment to Snake from the first game. His frustration with being manipulated parallels the player's potential frustration with the bait-and-switch of having Raiden replace Snake as protagonist. Kojima deliberately plays with these parallels, creating moments where the game breaks the fourth wall and addresses the player directly. The Colonel's instruction to turn the game console off speaks simultaneously to Raiden and the player. The revelation that Raiden's mission was constructed to replicate Shadow Moses mirrors the player's awareness that Metal Gear Solid 2 is constructed to parallel Metal Gear Solid. The themes of control and manipulation apply not just to Raiden, but to the player, who controls Raiden according to the game's rules and the designer's intentions. This meta-textual reading suggests that Raiden's struggle for agency within his narrative mirrors the player's relationship with the game itself. We control Raiden, but our control is limited by the game's programming. We make choices, but those choices are constrained by the options the designers provided. We experience the story as if it is unfolding based on our input. But in reality, the narrative was predetermined, our role merely to enact what was already written. The genius of this approach is that it uses Raiden's discomfort with his role to create player discomfort with their role. We share his frustration at being manipulated, his desire for genuine agency, his uncertainty about whether his choices matter. This shared experience creates an emotional connection between player and character that transcends the usual relationship between controller and avatar. Raiden's legacy within the Metal Gear series extends beyond his role in Sons of Liberty. His journey continues in Metal Gear Solid 4, where he appears as a cybernetic ninja. Having undergone extreme modifications that transform him into something barely human. This transformation represents both the consequences of his trauma and his continued struggle to define himself apart from the forces that shaped him. He rejects the humanity that the Patriots tried to control, embracing a cyborg existence that places him beyond their direct manipulation, while simultaneously raising questions about what he has sacrificed in pursuit of this independence. His starring role in Metal Gear Rising, Revengeance explores his attempt to reconcile the various aspects of his identity, accepting the Jack the Ripper persona while trying to direct it toward protecting others rather than serving forces of oppression. This later development completes an arc that began at the Big Shell, suggesting that the struggle for self-definition is ongoing, that the question of who we are is never fully resolved but must be continuously addressed throughout our lives. Looking at Raiden's story in its entirety reveals a narrative about what it means to be human in an age of information control, genetic engineering, and pervasive manipulation. He embodies the anxieties of the early 21st century, when technology was beginning to blur lines between real and virtual, when information warfare was emerging as a dominant mode of conflict, when questions about privacy, surveillance, and control were becoming central to political discourse. The Patriots' agenda in Metal Gear Solid 2 was not simply fictional speculation. It represented Kojima's analysis of trends he observed in contemporary society, the consolidation of media control, the use of information systems to shape public opinion, the ways in which technology could be deployed to monitor and influence behavior. The S3 plan was an extrapolation of these trends, an examination of what might happen if information control became so sophisticated that reality itself could be managed. Raiden's resistance to this control, limited and compromised as it is, suggests that even in a world of pervasive manipulation, human agency retains meaning. The capacity to recognize we are being controlled, to question the narratives we are given, to form authentic relationships despite the forces attempting to prevent them. These represent assertions of humanity against the logic of total control. His story resonates because it speaks to experiences that extend beyond the specific narrative of Metal Gear Solid 2. We all navigate a world where our understanding is shaped by information we did not personally verify, where our choices are influenced by systems we did not create, where authenticity itself can be difficult to distinguish from performance. Raiden's struggle to determine what is real, what matters, and who he wants to be reflects struggles we all face in trying to live authentically in an inauthentic world. The game does not offer easy answers to the questions it raises. It does not suggest that resistance to control is simple or that agency can be fully reclaimed. Instead, it presents these issues as ongoing challenges, dilemmas that must be navigated rather than problems that can be solved. Raiden's decision to continue his relationship with Rose, to try to build a life despite knowing the extent to which they have both been manipulated, represents an acceptance of complexity, a recognition that perfect clarity and certainty may be impossible, but that meaningful action remains possible nonetheless. Conclusion: the rain continues to fall. The story of Raiden in Metal Gear Solid 2, Sons of Liberty, is ultimately about the possibility of hope in a world designed to preclude it. It is about finding meaning despite manipulation, forming connections despite deception, and asserting agency despite control. It is about a young man who was shaped into a weapon as a child, who tried to escape that past only to be pulled back into violence by forces beyond his understanding, who discovered that his entire reality was constructed by those who sought to use him, and who nevertheless retained enough of himself to envision a different future. When we last see Raiden, walking away from Federal Hall with Rose at his side, the rain continues to fall over Manhattan. That rain is significant, appearing at crucial moments throughout his story. It fell when he was born in Liberia. It fell during the tanker incident that set the stage for his mission. It fell as he infiltrated the Big Shell. And it falls now as he leaves behind the physical site of his ordeal and attempts to move forward into an uncertain future. Rain cleanses, but it also obscures. It washes away evidence, but cannot erase memory. It is a natural phenomenon that cares nothing for human plans or meanings. Yet humans cannot help but project meaning onto it. The rain in Raiden's story serves as a reminder that some things remain beyond the Patriot's control, that nature operates according to its own logic regardless of human schemes, that reality persists beneath the layers of narrative and manipulation. Raiden's journey from child soldier to test subject to something approaching a self-determined individual represents a trajectory that many find inspiring despite its darkness. He does not emerge from his ordeal unscathed. His trauma remains. His uncertainty about what is real persists. His relationship with Rose carries the weight of knowing it began as a deception. But he endures, and in enduring, demonstrates that the human capacity for resilience, for finding meaning, for choosing to move forward, can survive even the most comprehensive attempts at control. The questions raised by his story remain relevant years after the game's release. In an age of social media manipulation, of algorithmic curation of information, of surveillance capitalism and data mining, the Patriot's vision of information control seems less like science fiction and more like a blueprint for actual power structures. We navigate systems designed to shape our behavior, influence our choices, and profit from our attention. The techniques are more subtle than the Patriot's direct intervention, but the underlying logic is similar. By controlling what we see, what we know, and how we understand events, those who control information systems can shape society according to their interests. Raiden's response to discovering this control, his choice to try to live authentically despite the manipulation, offers a model for how we might navigate similar challenges. Not through grand gestures of resistance or dramatic breaks with compromised systems, but through the daily practice of questioning narratives, forming genuine connections, and making choices that align with our values, even when those choices are constrained by forces beyond our control. The relationship between Snake and Raiden, mentor and student, previous generation and new generation, provides hope that knowledge can be transmitted, that those who have learned hard lessons can help others navigate similar challenges. Snake's encouragement of Raiden to think for himself, to reject the idea that he is merely a puppet, to believe that his choices matter, represents the passing on of wisdom that transcends the specific circumstances of the Big Shell incident. It is advice that applies to anyone struggling to assert agency in a world that often seems designed to deny it. Raiden's story also reminds us that identity is not fixed, that we are not forever defined by what was done to us or what we were forced to do. His transformation from Jack the Ripper to Raiden, to whatever he will become next, demonstrates that growth and change remain possible even after profound trauma. The past shapes us, but it does not have to determine us completely. We retain the capacity to write new chapters in our own stories, to integrate difficult experiences into a larger narrative of becoming, to be something more than the sum of our conditioning. The ambiguity of the game's ending is important. It does not provide the clean resolution of good defeating evil or a hero saving the day. Instead, it leaves Raiden in a state of uncertain hope, aware of the forces arrayed against him, unsure of what comes next, but committed to trying. This ambiguity respects the complexity of the questions raised by the narrative and acknowledges that real struggles for agency and authenticity do not have neat conclusions. For players who initially rejected Raiden as protagonist, time has often brought a deeper appreciation of what Kojima was attempting with the character. The controversy that surrounded his introduction was itself part of the point. Players wanted to be Solid Snake, the established hero, and were forced instead to be Raiden, the uncertain rookie. This discomfort mirrored Raiden's own discomfort with his role, creating an identification between player and character that was initially experienced as frustration, but that ultimately served the narrative's themes about control and expectation. Looking back at Metal Gear Solid 2 from the vantage point of more than 2 decades later, Raiden's story takes on additional resonance. The world has moved in directions that make the Patriots' plans seem less fantastical. Information warfare is now a recognized domain of military and political conflict. The manipulation of public understanding through coordinated disinformation campaigns has become routine. The collection and exploitation of personal data for behavioral modification is the foundation of major technological platforms. The questions the game raised about control, agency, and truth have become central to contemporary political and philosophical discourse. Raiden, the character who was initially dismissed by many as a poor substitute for Snake, has become symbolic of these concerns. His vulnerability to manipulation, his struggle to determine what is real, his attempt to assert agency despite systematic control, these resonate with lived experience in the information age. He is us, in a sense, navigating systems designed to shape our behavior, questioning our own memories and perceptions, trying to determine what genuinely matters in a world of mediated experience. His survival, compromised and uncertain as it is, suggests that we too can survive, can resist, can find meaning despite the forces arrayed against authentic human experience. The rain continues to fall, washing away what can be washed away, leaving behind what is too deeply rooted to be removed. And we, like Raiden, walk forward into that rain, uncertain of what lies ahead, but committed to the journey nonetheless. The complete story of Raiden is not complete. It continues beyond the big shell, beyond the events of Metal Gear Solid 2, into subsequent chapters that explore his ongoing struggle with identity, agency, and meaning. But the foundation laid in Sons of Liberty remains crucial to understanding his character and the themes he embodies. He is the child soldier who became a hero despite being designed to be a puppet. He is the test subject who retained his humanity despite systematic attempts at control. He is the rookie who learned that being legendary is less important than being genuine. And as the rain falls over Manhattan, washing the streets clean of the night's violence but leaving the memories intact, Raiden walks forward, Rose at his side, toward a future that is his to shape as much as anyone's future can be their own. It is not the ending anyone expected. It is not the resolution anyone would have designed. But it is real, and in a story so concerned with the nature of reality that authenticity matters more than perfection. The thunder rolls, the lightning flashes, and somewhere in the darkness, a young man who has been called by many names but knows he is more than any of them, continues his journey toward becoming the person he chooses to be. That choice, limited and compromised as it may be, represents hope. And in a world designed to eliminate hope, its persistence, however fragile, represents victory. Thank you so much for watching this deep dive into the complete story of Raiden from Metal Gear Solid 2, Sons of Liberty. If you enjoyed this exploration of one of gaming's most complex and fascinating characters, please consider liking this video and subscribing to Lore Save Point for more in-depth analyses of video game lore and narrative. The world of Metal Gear is vast and interconnected, and there are many more stories to tell. Until next time, keep questioning what you're told, keep seeking authentic experience, and remember that even in a world of manipulation, your choices matter. Thank you for being part of this journey.